Welcome everyone to our webinar. My name is Jamie and I'll be your host for today. Our presenter is Laura Graham and I would hand over to her in just a few moments. Before I do, I just want to remind you that we will plan for the webinar to run around 30 minutes, with a few minutes or so for questions at the end. I will have everyone on mute throughout the session. So if you have a question, please type this into the questions panel you should see online at any time. And finally, the session is being recorded and will be available for download in the next day or so. So with that, I will hand over to Laura.
Thanks, Jamie. I'd like to echo Jamie's sentiments and welcome everyone to today's webinar. Also, if you have attended our previous webinars in the series, then welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. So today I plan to share with you our thoughts and ideas behind what we call effective project handover. In actual fact, we at Kinsmen Group have taken it a bit further than simply thoughts and ideas, and we've turned this into a set of unique services which use our solutions and our people to plan, prepare, perform and manage the complete handover for organisations which are just like yours. So really I'm kind of giving away some of our trade secrets here on this webinar. Anyway, before I start, I wanted to share just a little bit about me. My name is Lara and as you can see I'm a senior solution architect here at Kinsmen Group. I'm not in marketing or sales, you might be pleased to hear, but I actually spend all of my days delivering solutions, services and support to our customers. Now you may be able to hear that I am from Scotland in the UK, so there may perhaps be a translated webinar at the end of this if need be, but I'll try and slow it down. I won't bore you with my life history at all, but I have implemented many solutions on both major capital projects, operations and maintenance projects, as well as asset transfers as well. With all of these, a smooth project handover was always a key requirement. So I spent a lot of time consulting with and actually learning from all sides of the spectrum, including large owner-operators, engineering prime contractors and equipment vendors and suppliers. Everyone of course tends to have different views and ways of working, but ultimately the solutions that we deliver are very similar. So I just want to share with you today how I would approach the topic of project handover with my customers. So let's go and start the webinar. So I'd like to start by first challenging ourselves to really understand the problem and to appreciate just why project handover is so difficult and of course the results of it being done badly. And I suppose before we do that, perhaps I should explain what I mean when I say project handover, as no doubt some of you will maybe have different views and perspectives. So for me, project handover is a term used to describe a process or a set of processes that are needed at the point where an asset, such as a large facility for example, is ready to be commissioned and put into operation. More literally, the term means handing over that vital project information which has been created to date for the use of the operations and maintenance teams going forward. So with that said, let's get back to understanding the problem. And I can start by saying that through a large number of the engineering document management implementation projects that I've been involved in, this area is so very often overlooked. Now perhaps it was because it was the project that was funding it and therefore leading the implementation. But whatever the reason, little effort is generally applied to the important process after the capital project completes, which is of course the project handover. So let's first consider what the result of a poor handover actually means. And it's usually the operation and maintenance teams that feel this pain the most. I'm sure anyone on this webinar in those areas would agree. They may discover that information such as drawings are simply missing or not locatable in the structure that they've been delivered. Not having an efficient access to that critical piping or instrumentation layout, for example, can have really serious consequences, as you can imagine. And what happens when you do find that important drawing and use it as part of a work order to undertake some maintenance, only to find when you actually are on the job that the drawing simply doesn't match the actual asset? How much time has been wasted? How do you move forward? Which is right, the drawing or the physical asset? Now, of course, bad equipment data can also cause similar problems all too easily. If the equipment information you have doesn't match that pump in front of you, what do you do? And what if replacement parts have been ordered based on that bad information and your teams find that they can't install it as it simply doesn't fit? Now, all of these problems are probably not new to anyone here, and your teams may have found ways to resolve most of them through one means or another, maybe over time. But just imagine if one of these relatively simple issues was the cause behind a major incident. They may have seemed small before, but now they suddenly take on a whole new shape. So given some of the outcomes of it going wrong, let's now just consider how it goes wrong. How do we even get ourselves into this situation? Well, your maintenance teams feel they have to hope and pray for good information, and that's not good. It should be a given that good information is handed over. Well, let's start with poor project processes, where during the project lifetime, drawings and maybe data have not been thoroughly reviewed, checked and validated. Now, this may be through a lack of good systems or solutions to ensure this happens. For example, what we refer to as smart deliverables management solution, that would ensure that you don't just technically review drawings, but every piece of data held within them is also checked and validated and through an automated process. Otherwise, you're just relying on the engineers checking every data tag, which is humanly very difficult, as you can imagine. Now, I should say, if you don't know what I mean about or referencing smart deliverables management concept, then pop onto our website and look at the last webinar recording if you weren't able to make it, and also the demonstration of our viewport solution. Now, believe me, it really changes the way tag data can be checked through automated identification, validation and extraction. The next reason I think Project Handover often goes wrong is through lack of preparation. So as I said earlier, very often I've seen this subject ignored or parked, possibly with the intentions to revisit, but before you know it, it's too late. So knowing up front what's to be identified as handover material, for example, is going to give you a much clearer idea of how you need to perform that handover. Knowing the target system too and timeframes, now these may seem obvious, I know, but don't forget to work through them all early in your capital project. So no matter how you plan or how clean your data is ready or how ready you feel that information is, if you then fail to hand this over accurately, you've wasted a lot of time, effort and of course cost already. And you may be thinking, why is it so difficult? Isn't it just a case of extracting everything and passing it over to someone in another part of the business, just for them to do as they see fit? Well, yes, we could do that, and many people do that. But how about thinking more about the actual process and what you need from it, so that you can make sure it's painless and efficient and above all else it works? So let me take you through the handover process and how to make it work. Now, I want us to look at how we can break the cycle of these problems and turn the handover into a far more effective and efficient process. There are 4 key areas, I think, which are important to consider and work through, and I'll go into each briefly. They are scope, data, delivery, and archive. So we're going to start with scope. Well, what do we mean by scope? Well, it's got no real special meaning here. It means the same as it does with any project, process or activity really. So for us it simply means what exactly is to be handed over, when, how and to whom. And if you don't consider setting your scope early enough or at all, you'll never get it right, because you really don't have anything to measure that success against. And if you don't know your scope, can you implement the right process really? What I mean is, a manual document handover process might work for a few hundred drawings and documents, but what about a few thousand or even more? Wouldn't some level of automation be necessary? Now, I should caveat what I've just said there by adding that many capital projects do know at the outset exactly what information will be needed or to be handed over to operations. And this can be indicated on the initial document register or the MDR. Some would go further still and define right at the outset the form of that handover, so whether it's DVDs, if it's electronic or physical books. I'm going to look at this from those who may not have that clear scope well defined. So how do we establish our scope? Firstly, let's look and identify what we believe is the important stuff. This might be the information related to safety, commissioning, startup and shutdown, but also the PNIDs and the data. I can't tell you what's most important for your operational teams, but work through them and it will quickly become clear what you need to flag as important within your business. Failure to identify this, and you could be handing them over information that they really don't need or prioritising it the wrong way. And I can't tell you how many times I've started working with organisations post-handover to find that every single document created in the project was simply thrown over the wall. For operations to then try and work out what they have, it causes delay and confusion. Now, armed with knowing what's important, you then need to think and plan on when this information will be needed. For example, what is needed for the various startup and commissioning stages? What is more relevant to decommissioning and end of life? There can be a world of difference about when information is needed, and knowing this will help you better plan an effective handover. And finally, of course, we also need to identify who needs this. Now, that might seem really obvious, it's the operations and maintenance teams, right? Well, yes, it is, but there are also other things to consider there. So, does anyone else need this information outside of operations? What about safety inspectors, for example? And the users of this information, where are they located? How will they access the systems? What systems do they currently use? Will they always be connected or not? How will they expect to see it structured or numbered? And when it comes to structure and numbering, this is always a hot topic when you're implementing a solution for engineering documentation. Projects usually like to see information one way and operations like to see it in another way. But by engaging both at the outset, you can add capabilities to allow for both to be happy. So understand the scope from the start, and that's why I personally always encourage people from operations side of the business to be part of any solution that a capital project is deploying. Yes, it can make for some interesting workshops sometimes, but it is important for all the voices to be heard and for all those requirements to be understood from the get-go. Okay, so now one thing I didn't really talk about there is data. Data is vitally important and represents all the information about equipment, the facility and more. So just think equipment tags on your PNIDs and you'll be in the right place. This is very important, but again, it's often overlooked as part of the project handover. These so-called data elements, not the drawings and documents themselves, but the data within them, they're really often overlooked. And if we don't pay particular attention to this data, it can have dire consequences. Now, if your project has operated in a smart way, as I mentioned earlier with the smart deliverables management, then the data used throughout your documentation, it will be known, it will have been checked and validated, and it will be ready to import into your asset management system. But what if your project did not cover this aspect? What do we have to do? Well, data that is extracted for import into the asset systems, but that's not been validated with any accuracy, or perhaps no data extracted at all, let alone validated, that's what you could be faced with. This can be quite devastating for the operational teams, and if they don't have to inherit either bad or missing equipment data, that would just be a nightmare for them. So they would maybe need to perform a full equipment audit on the facility itself to recapture all that data the right way. I've heard of this happening, and the cost is pretty scary. So what's the answer? Well, I suppose it depends on where you are. If you can wrap this data validation into your project, then you should. The more that's done at the point of creation or delivery, in the case of some technical documentation being outsourced, means that you can address issues with missing, duplicated or wrong data at that immediate time. Again, look back to our previous webinar where we talked about data tag extraction as part of your management of contractor deliverables during a capital project. There we also talked about how a tool like Radial Viewport can help extract that information manually, automatically too. But if you have already fast approaching handover to operations now, it's still not too late. You can assess the severity of the data situation. Does it need checking? Does it need a full extraction, for example? And again, consider how to do that rather than simply hand over bad data. It may seem a delay to execute a tag extraction and validation process at such a late stage, but it will still be less costly than bad data causing an incident to your facility a year from now. Far, far less costly. Now, I've mentioned this a couple of times already, so let me just show you this quick image from our solution to data validation, correction and extraction for drawings and documents such as P&IDs. What you see here is a screenshot of Radial Viewport. The good thing about a tool like Viewport is, while you might consider something like this to review and improve your data ready for import to the asset management system, it can actually live way beyond that and serve as a fantastic portal interface to all your drawings and data in whatever systems they live in. Operations and maintenance team often dream of a single source to find everything, so I do urge you to look at it if you're interested. Okay, so we're going to move on now. So we know what we want to hand over, and we've ensured that good data is part of that scope. Now, whilst I'm going to talk about a more simple scenario where your organisation is running both the capital project and the operational side, some organisations will use external parties to manage their projects or even their operations and maintenance. So in those cases, the points I'm going to make are simply more complicated because those external parties may use additional systems and different systems to each other. But the premise will remain the same. So how do we actually deliver the handover? Well, we first need to identify the relevant handover information in our systems. If you're storing information in an engineering document management system, a file system, or even on paper, which some will, I guarantee it, you still need to find a way to identify and mark or flag that information as destined for the handover process. So, thinking through the process, do you have a mechanism to identify that core information within your system? Can you also indicate priorities to track what is needed and in what order? Does your system provide a mechanism to then collate this information and check it for completeness? For example, document validation and an approval workflow? Do you have the capability to produce printed output, such as databooks? The delivery process itself needs to be understood, planned, and then of course executed. Generally, it is preferred that the handover process be performed in as little time as possible. And if you have planned and prepared well, you should be able to perform this reasonably swiftly. Now, the word package I use here might be interpreted literally by some, but not by others. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. The point I want to really make here is that you should deliver information in a way that is traceable, recordable, retrievable, efficient, and of course, accurate. Much like the process years ago might have been to load thousands of paper drawing rolls into a van and move across to the operations group, or you sent it via FedEx, it simply means a way to group or collate or package, if you will, the information for handover. So here you should think about how you can group, collate or package that information. What capabilities does your system have today to collate this already flagged and prioritised information ready for the actual handover? Do you need people to help with the collation exercise? Then, how will you issue that information? Is this a process of extracting from one system to import into another? Do you need to send the information outside of your organisation? Perhaps because you've outsourced your maintenance work. How large is the information set? Does this affect how you issue it? Do you need people to help with the actual delivery? And what about during delivery? You should really track your handover progress. What's been handed over? What's outstanding? When will you be complete? Again, do you have the people to monitor and oversee this process? If you have planned and prepared well, have the systems and the people to execute well, then your handover will be more efficient. It will definitely carry less risk of failure, and the result will be a more efficient operational phase. And just one last point on this, if I could. Over time, of course, something else other than just the move from paper to electronic has changed the way organisations manage both the projects and the operations information. That change really is the emergence over recent years of single systems and solutions that can handle both projects and assets. So this delivery mechanism is often no more than specific functions that recategorise, refile and possibly change security all within the same system. Bluecello Meridian is one such solution that we've found very efficient in project handover processes for the very reason that it handles both aspects of the process and the transfer between the two as well. This makes the whole packaging and issuing, tracking as well, far easier, as you can imagine. And this here is just a quick screen, again, this time of Bluecello Meridian, where you can see how it handles both the projects and the assets in one single system. In this solution, you can hand over the project information as collections or single documents to the assets or masters area, as you can see here in this screenshot. And this is all performed using specific inbuilt functions that take care of the auditing, tracking and the security aspects too. So do take a look, there's more on our website about this solution if you're interested. Okay, so we're nearly there, and there's one last piece of the puzzle really, and that's archiving. So what do I mean by archiving? Well, as we've said many times already, we only want to hand over what the operation and maintenance teams need, not everything produced on a project, which you know can be a lot of information, should go over to operations and maintenance. A lot of this might simply be early design or work in progress type information that simply isn't needed to operate the asset. However, you will want to keep this, so what do you do with it? Well, you move it to a project archive. This is not particularly exciting, I know, but it is an important part of the capital project closeout phase, just as the handover is. So again, you need to think about what you will archive, how you will archive it and to where. The preparation and planning really is much the same as the handover information, and that you need to work out if it's to go to another system and hence maybe needs extracting, or whether it will reside in some other area of the same system, similar to what we saw there. So the Bluecello Meridian solution that we did see, it's got a project archive function that's already built in, and that will move, reset security and hide that archive information to another part of the same repository as you decide. But don't forget the archive. You really never know when you might need that old whiteboard photograph of some early designs. We've all been there. Okay, so I'm going to quickly wrap up and end with just a short note about our project handover service. I mentioned this at the top of the webinar. as I've said, we've taken all of our experiences, we've talked to customers and solution providers to establish a set of services that not only provide solutions, but also skilled people that can help when you need them. Our Project Handover service is a service used in conjunction with our Smart Deliverables management, and it can be used really regardless of any systems and solutions you have in use today. We have a skilled team and they can really help prepare, plan and execute the handover with maximum efficiency. So please check our website and contact us for more details. So last but not least, just a quick reminder of some other resources that we do have available on our website. We have a demo of both Viewport and Bluecello Meridian. That's the screenshots that I've shown throughout this webinar, and they can be downloaded soon from our website. We also have various white papers currently available on the Kinsmen Group website. And my favourite is our business fable, and it's just a funny look at poor information management in an operational world. It's definitely an interesting read and I recommend it, and it's actually close to home on the subject of Project Handover and what happens when it's done badly. So with that being said, I just want to say thanks very much for listening. I really appreciate the time, and I'm going to hand back to Jamie and see if you guys have got any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, let's see. Now we can take a few minutes to go over a couple of questions that came in. First question, let's see. What is an MDR?
An MDR, oh, I said that, sorry, but I didn't expand any further. MDR stands for Master Document Register. It's just a register of all the documentation that a capital project is expected to generate, and often that's by external or third parties, and it really forms a contract between the owner-operators and their engineering design partners. So apologies for throwing that phrase out there. That's what MDR is.
Okay, no worries. Okay, let's see. Do you use transmittals?
Transmittals, yes. Well, you could use transmittals as part of the solution. Possibly if you were delivering that handover to external parties, for example. Transmittals have added benefits of, traceability and acceptance, which are built in usually. Well, I know they're built in Meridian certainly. So yes, you could use transmittals if you're handing over to external parties.
Okay, looks like we only have time for one more question. Rest assured we're going to get in contact with everyone to answer those remaining ones. Last one. Let's see. How does SAP work in this?
Well, SAP, okay, well, SAP, as you know, is, it's a system which stores information, and it's principally for operations. So SAP needs to be fed to everything. It needs really post-project. So again, we can move data into SAP, or we can read from it just like any other system, of course. But, the cool thing about Viewport, which is the radio solution I've been talking about, if SAP already has that data and you just simply want to marry it up to the documents, Viewport can point to both of them and merge them almost instantly, and it kind of gives you a full integrated view. It's really cool, and you can easily navigate between data tags and documents and vice versa. So that's just one example of how SAP can work within the Project Handover.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. And I want to say thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Christy.